Hey there, this is Brother Woody Turner back with our home edition, our first at home Sunday school lesson from May the 10th. This week's lesson is entitled Jesus Reveals His Power, and it comes from the text Mark chapter 1, verses 21 through 42. If you're looking at your Gospel Project material, if you have that, you'll notice that in the Gospel Project study guide, we skip around. We don't do every last verse. But we're going to read them all at some point, probably, just to give you an idea of what all the interconnecting verses are. But as I said, Jesus Reveals His Power is our title, and our session outline has 3 points as usual. The first, Jesus reveals His power, Mark 1:21 through 28. Second, Jesus proclaims His purpose, Mark 1:35 through 38. And third, and finally, Jesus displays His compassion, Mark 1:39 through 42. In this section, we see Jesus kind of doing what He does. He heals people, He's preaching, and we see Him interacting with people on a direct basis. It's kind of a Cliff's Notes version of what Jesus did here on earth in the 3 years following or leading up to the passion, the arrest and death and burial and resurrection. So what He was doing in His ministry time is essentially, what we're looking at today, Mark chapter 1. All right, point number 1, Jesus reveals His power, and we're going to read verses 21 through 34. And when they came and went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath He entered the synagogue and was teaching. And they were astonished at His teaching, for He taught them as one who had authority and not as the scribes. So what that means is Jesus spoke not referring to someone else's work or not referring to any other previous study or anyone else's power or thoughts on the subject. He taught that this is what the Scripture teaches, this is what it means, this is how you apply it. And the scribes in those days were typically scholarly, and if you've ever been in scholarly circles, or if you've ever read a scholarly paper or review, it's all about the footnotes. It's all about the quotes and who you've cited, and so it's not surprising that the scribes were that way. I hesitate to say it, but it would be pretty much the same thing if you interviewed, let's say, seminary professors today. If a seminary professor is writing a paper on, a doctrinal issue like sin or something, there's going to be a million quotes in there. He's going to read all kinds of sources, and he's going to tell you who said what and when and that, and then he's going to have, a little bit of his own thoughts and opinion in there. That's the way it's typically done. But Jesus is speaking with a fresh voice, and it's unusual, and it catches everybody's ear. And by the way, it's not something that I would encourage a normal person to do. And there's a reason why the scribes did that. There's wisdom in the collective knowledge, in the collective body of knowledge. As a matter of fact, if you hear a theologian saying something to you that you've never heard before in your life, or that goes against what you've always heard, be wary. Okay, so Jesus can do this. We can do it too, but with a lot less authority. So they were astonished at His teaching. 23, and immediately there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. And he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Okay, let's pause right there. That's verses 23 and 24. Let's look at the very first, verse 23. And immediately there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. Not to be too tongue-in-cheek here, but He was demon possessed and he came to church. So, yeah, they're around. And I 100% believe that there are demon possessed people that go to church. I don't think I would point to anybody in our congregation, and say that person's demon possessed. But the truth is, I feel like there's 100% chance that somebody possessed of a demon has been at First Baptist Church at some point. There are people like this. And, in today's world, we have a lot of difficulty believing in demon possession, and we look at these things through the eyes of medicine and psychology, and we say, oh, well, this is schizophrenia, or this is epilepsy, or something like that. And it very well could be. I mean, there is nothing written in stone that says how demons work and what they can do to a body. It's very possible to me to think that a demon could inflict someone with a physical condition. That looks a lot like a physical condition, or maybe is a physical condition. A demon could maybe cause these things. I don't know. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say you don't know either. This is a mystery to us. And there are people that write books on these things and make it sound, again, like we just said that Jesus can do, that they speak with authority and they know what's up. But I don't trust those things. What we know we have in the scriptures, and what we have in the scriptures is a description where Jesus is treating these people as if their problem is demon possession and not a mental illness or a physical malady, first and foremost. So in this case, what he's doing is accurate, it's true, it's right. This man was possessed by a demon, or had an unclean spirit. And there's plenty of places in the New Testament where you can find similar stories, in Mark specifically. So, a man was in church with an unclean spirit. That ought to give us a little pause in verse 24. And he starts calling out Jesus. Hey, what are you doing here? What's your beef with us, Jesus of Nazareth? I know who you are, the Holy One of God, he says. And he's about to out Jesus before Jesus is ready. And so Jesus says, all right, shut up and get out. That's the Cliff's Notes version. Now, in the Bible, it says, be silent and come out of him. But remember, Jesus was probably speaking in Aramaic. It was translated into Greek for the sake of recording it in a language that everybody knew. And then it was translated again into English. So I think there's a pretty good chance that Jesus said to him in Aramaic, shut up and get out. Could be wrong about that. But that's the sentiment here. And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying out with a loud voice, came out of him. So in other words, Jesus said, shut up and get out, and he shut up and went. And that freaked everybody out. Verse 27, they were all amazed, and they questioned themselves, what is this? A new teaching with authority, and he even commands unclean spirits that obey him. In other words, he didn't say to them, by the power of Yahweh, leave this man. Or he didn't say some incantation, kukamunga jigabaka, get out of the, some sort of weird spiritual sort of sounding mantra or spell or ritual. He didn't try to create power by ritual. He didn't appeal to a higher power than himself. It's clear to these people that the spirits obeyed him because of what he said. His inherent power and authority is what they listened to. And that was unbelievable, because demon possession and exorcism was a business in this day and time. Verse 28, at once his fame spread everywhere throughout all the surrounding region of Galilee. So everybody found out about it. Verse 29, and immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. So he wanted to get the heat off of him. He didn't want people rushing around. What's this business about Holy One of God? So now Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. The fever left her, and she began to serve them. This is actually a story I referenced last week when we were talking about Simon and the disciples leaving everything. And I noted that Obviously, Simon didn't leave everything because he was still married, and this is one of those cases. Jesus goes to his house, and his mother-in-law is there, so his wife's mother. So anyway, Jesus heals Simon's mother-in-law, and like any good mother-in-law would do, immediately she pops up and says, "Oh, can I get y'all something to eat? Are y'all thirsty? Y'all sit down right here and I'll go make something." That's what a mother-in-law does, right? Or a good mother or mother-in-law. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. He healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. So the fame about Jesus had spread throughout the demonic world quicker than the human world. Now, I don't think that we ought to see demons as some sort of omniscient creatures who just know everything. That's not the case. They have to be informed. How they get informed, I don't know. But let's not overlap God's power with demons and devil's power. Okay, God can do things that the devil can't do, and one of those is be aware and have knowledge of all things at all times. But Jesus didn't want the demons to spill the beans about who he was. So naturally, he, closed their mouths. But he did heal, and he cast out demons. He performed miracles. He revealed his power, and his fame spread throughout the region because of that. All right, point number 2, Jesus proclaims his purpose. Mark 1:35 through 38. Just a few verses here. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. So Jesus needed his alone time. He needed to focus. He needed his downtime. And in Jesus' humanity, it makes sense. All of us need to be alone sometimes. Some of us feel that need more often than others. I'm one of those people that I get overwhelmed by just lots of interaction and conversation and things like that, and I need to recharge by chilling out and being alone sometimes. Other people love spending time with people, and the more the better, but everyone, regardless of your temperament, needs time alone. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said, "Hey, Jesus, everybody's looking for you." And Jesus is like, "Yeah, I know, hence the desolate place." See, that's the whole idea. That's not exactly what it says, but anyway, verse 38, and he said to them, "Let's go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came." And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. Notice he gives the purpose for why he came here. He didn't come to heal. He did that, but that's not why he came. He didn't come to cast out demons. He did that, but that's not why he came. It says he came to preach, to inform, to challenge, to convict, to tell the good news. That's why he came. And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. So their synagogues are kind of like mini temples, right? When you can't go to the temple, you can go to the synagogue and worship together. And so that's where he was going, the Jewish centers of worship throughout Galilee. And I think it's interesting. I've noted something interesting in Jesus' ministry, which is that he heals people when they come to him or when they're brought to him. He casts out demons when the people come to him or when they're brought to him. He feeds people who come to him. He does things. He works miracles, and he meets people's physical needs when they approach him and when they come to him. But if you'll notice, Jesus never goes on a healing mission. He never goes on a feeding the world mission. Now, these are good things, and I'm not saying Christians shouldn't do those, but what does Jesus say to his disciples? He's saying, Everybody's looking for you. Jesus, come on out and heal them some more. And Jesus says, no, we got to go, man. There's people that haven't heard the gospel yet. Like, we got to go to the next town. I came to preach. I came to share the gospel. And I think churches sometimes get our mission mixed up and upside down. And there was a movement in the early 19th century, maybe earlier, the social gospel movement, which put at the center of the church's mission, helping others and meeting needs. And again, that's a good thing. But, at this point in time where that's kind of what we can do for the world, I don't want us to get the mistaken impression that this is what the church has to offer the world. The church has something better than bread to offer the world. The church has something better than water to offer the world, or money to offer the world. This is literally word for word, what Jesus said. I am the bread of life. If you eat from me, you'll never be hungry. I am the life-giving water. If you drink of me, you'll never thirst. There is something that the church has to give, and that's what we ought to be giving first and foremost. Again, we're not to turn away people in need and that sort of thing, but I thought it was interesting that even Jesus says, hey, my purpose isn't to be a social gospel preacher or teacher or practitioner. My purpose is to preach the kingdom and the coming kingdom, to preach the gospel. And so I think that's what our churches ought to be about as well, as we try to emulate our Lord and Savior. We have genuine compassion on people, but our main goal is preaching the gospel and making disciples. All right, point number 3, Jesus displays his compassion. We've already touched on that, but Mark 39, 139 through 42. And he went out from Galilee and preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. We've read that. And a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling or on his knees, and said to him, if you will it, you can make me clean. In other words, if you want to. Verse 41, moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and he touched him and said, I will be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him and he was made clean. A lot of things happening here. Jesus is taking compassion on that person. Like I just mentioned, our first goal, first and foremost, is the gospel. But Jesus doesn't tell him, get away from me. I got to go preach. I got more important things to do. I don't have time to deal with you. No, Jesus takes time out of his very busy life and schedule for one man. And one man who's almost kind of coming to him in a challenge like, hey, I know if you want to, you can clean me. Now, the ball's in your court, Jesus. Do you want to make me clean? Like, do you even care about me? In verse 41, Jesus was moved with pity. Don't get the idea that Jesus is some sort of a fatalistic, all-powerful math formula that, actions come in, applies justice, outcome. That's the way he sees the world. He has pity. He has compassion. The reason you and I have pity and compassion is because we're made in the image of God. He feels sorry for the man. He wants to help him. And he does something unthinkable. Jesus, the most pure being in the universe, reaches out his hand and he lays it on top of a filthy, virus-ridden leper. Well, I don't know if leprosy is a virus, but anyway, it's a very contagious disease that is, by all accounts, a horrific way to live and end your life. Jesus touched the filthy. And instead of the leper making Jesus filthy, Jesus makes the leper clean. And this is what he does for us too. Now, this is a mini lesson for us in the church as well. When we go out into the world as a church or as individuals, we ought to be the ones making clean. We're not to go out into the world and become soiled and tainted by the world, which does happen. A church gets involved in mercy ministries, and we get around other people, other entities and companies and organizations that aren't Christians, and we become tainted by the world. Rather than going into the taint and the disgusting and dark and dirty world and making it clean, which is what Jesus did. But Jesus was moved with pity, and so should we. We should be moved with pity. And I'm not telling you to do something specific, like every single time somebody asks you for money, you need to give it. I don't think that is a command that you can say. Jesus didn't. He never said things similar to that. He gave commands about being overly generous. If a man asks you to walk with him 1 mile, walk 2. But I don't think he means to say that you ought to give money to charlatans knowing they're charlatans and that sort of thing. Just because somebody asks for money. But if you see someone in need, you ought to help. It's simple. If you're able to help and you see someone in need, you ought to help. Have pity like Jesus did. And he did. Jesus was busy. He had, as he said, important things to do. He had to go preach, which is true. We as a church, we cannot stop preaching the gospel in order to feed the hungry. We can't do it. That's not our mission on earth. Our mission is to go ye therefore to all the earth and to make disciples. Okay? But on our way, when we see this leper, when we see the filth and the difficulty and the suffering and the heartbreak in society, we can be and should be moved with compassion to pause our journey and to reach out into a dark and dirty world and bring healing and bring cleanliness and cleansing through the power of the gospel, and also, yes, through the power of bread and water and money as need be. We may not be called primarily to do those things, but they are a part of the mission of the church. Let's just keep them in priority as we go forward, especially right now during the COVID-19 crisis, when this is the face of the church. And I think we're doing a great job here at First Baptist, and I see a lot of good things going on around the world. I think the church is doing what the church ought to be doing right now. And so I'm proud of us at First Baptist, and I'm proud of our sister churches for ministering to our community. And as we share the gospel, and as we go forward, and as we're given opportunity, and as people come to us, we're able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and to be moved to pity and compassion for our community.